If you saw me today, camera in hand, jeans, worn-out sneakers, you'd never guess that just a few years ago, I was sleeping in a marble office on Wall Street, running on espresso shots and adrenaline, making money so fast I didn't even know what to do with it. You'd never guess I once stood at the top, looking down at the world, only to lose it all in the blink of an eye. My name is Michael Turner, but most people just called me Mike. I grew up in Baltimore, in a small neighborhood where everyone knew each other, where success meant maybe owning a small business or getting out to a safer part of town. But me, I wanted more. I didn't just want comfort, I wanted power. And the funny thing is, I actually got it. I got to the very heart of Wall Street, to that electric chaos I dreamed about since I was a kid. I climbed higher than I ever thought possible. But dreams have sharp edges, and this one cut me deep. This is my story. I still remember the night it started. I was 10 years old, sitting on the floor in front of our old box TV. My dad had passed out on the couch after his shift at the docks, and my mom was still at the diner. A documentary came on, something about Wall Street, about traders shouting numbers, about fortunes being made and lost in seconds. Most kids would have changed the channel, but I sat there frozen. Those screens with endless numbers, the voices of men who sounded like generals in battle, the energy that poured out of that TV. It was like watching another world, and something inside me just clicked. I wanted to be there. I didn't care how. I wanted to stand in that chaos, speak that language, play that game. It wasn't just about money, though God knows money mattered. It was about proving that a kid from Baltimore could walk into the most powerful street in the world and hold his own. The problem was, I had nothing. No money, no connections, no blueprint. Just a kid with an obsession that seemed ridiculous to everyone around me. But that obsession burned hot enough to push me through the years ahead. And trust me, obsession can take you far, but it can also eat you alive. Getting from Baltimore to Wall Street wasn't some fairy tale. It was ugly, messy, and filled with nights where I questioned if the dream was even worth it. But every time I thought about giving up, I pictured that 10-year-old kid watching the TV, eyes wide, and I knew I had to keep going. In high school, I wasn't the smartest kid in the room, not by a long shot. There were kids who could ace tests without even opening a book. That wasn't me. I had to grind. I'd stay up late with a flashlight under the covers, going over math problems or reading about markets from borrowed library books. My friends laughed when I said I wanted Wall Street. "Mike, you can't even afford lunch half the time," one of them said. They weren't wrong. But what they didn't see was how badly I wanted out. College was my ticket. I didn't get into Harvard or Yale like the sons of bankers, but I landed at a decent state school with a scholarship and 2 part-time jobs to keep myself afloat. I washed dishes at night, handed out flyers during the day, and spent every spare minute studying finance. My professors noticed. One of them, Professor Daniels, pulled me aside one day and said, "Mike, you've got something most of these kids don't. Hunger. Don't lose it." That sentence stuck with me. Networking was my lifeline. I went to every event, every dull lecture, every mixer where I didn't belong, just to shake hands with people in suits. Most of them brushed me off, but sometimes I'd find someone willing to give advice. I collected business cards like they were gold. By 2003, I got my shot, an internship at a mid-sized brokerage firm on Wall Street. I still remember the first day walking into that building. The lobby was marble, the elevators polished, and the people rushing past me looked like they didn't have a second to waste. I wore my only decent suit, a little too big for me, and clutched my new briefcase like it was armor. At first, it was humiliating. I wasn't trading or advising clients. I was running for coffee, making endless copies, and fixing jammed printers. But I never complained. I stayed late, I listened, I absorbed everything like a sponge. And little by little, people started noticing. I wasn't just the coffee kid anymore. I was the intern who worked harder than anyone, who knew details others missed, who actually cared. And that's how the climb began. I wasn't there yet, not even close. But I could smell it. I could feel Wall Street letting me in, inch by inch. By 2005, I finally had my own desk. No more running for coffee, no more late-night copies. A real desk, a phone line, and a screen filled with more numbers than most people could even process in a lifetime. I'd made it into the pit. That first year was like nothing I'd ever experienced. The adrenaline was unreal. Imagine your heart pounding like you're standing at the edge of a cliff, ready to jump. But instead of falling, you're throwing money into the air and watching it multiply in real time. That's what a good trade felt like. And when the bad ones hit, it was like the cliff crumbled under your feet and you were clawing to hang on. I wasn't making millions yet, but to a kid from Baltimore, even a six-figure bonus felt like winning the lottery. I remember sending money back home to my mom, more in a single check than she'd ever earned in months at the diner. She cried on the phone. I pretended I didn't, but I did too. Of course, I wasn't just sending money home. I bought a used BMW, the kind of car I used to point at on the street and think belonged to another species of human. I moved into a better apartment, one with actual views instead of cracked brick walls. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel poor. But the real drug wasn't the money. It was the game. The screens lighting up like fireworks, the phones buzzing nonstop, the shouting across the floor when stocks spiked or tanked. Every second mattered. I'd get goosebumps when a risky move landed, like I'd just fit the winning shot in the finals. My boss, Richard Mallory, noticed. Richard was old school, slicked back hair, sharp suits, a Rolex that probably cost his whole salary. One afternoon, he leaned on my desk, looked me in the eye, and said, "Mike, you've got guts. Don't lose that." Coming from him, it felt like a medal of honor. But here's the truth. Guts only take you so far. The longer I stayed in that room, the more I realized this wasn't a sprint. It was a marathon at sprint speed. The hours were insane. I'd stumble out of the office at midnight, crash for 4 hours, and be back by dawn. My hand started to shake from too much coffee. My chest tightened more than once from the stress. But I ignored it. I told myself this was the price. And for a while, it was worth it. The thrill of those trades, the money rolling in, the respect from guys who'd never even looked at me before, that kept me going. But deep down, cracks were already forming. I just didn't want to see them yet. By 2007, the cracks I'd been ignoring weren't cracks anymore. They were canyons. I was exhausted, burned out in a way coffee couldn't fix. Every morning, I'd drag myself to the office in a suit that felt heavier by the day. I'd sit at my desk, screens glowing, phones ringing, but sometimes I just stared at the numbers, completely blank, like my brain had short-circuited. The thing about Wall Street that no one tells you is this: it doesn't stop. The markets never rest. Even when the closing bell rings, the next day is already loading. You're never caught up, never done. It's a treadmill set to sprint speed, and if you stumble, you get chewed up and spit out. I tried to hide it. I forced myself to smile when trades went well, nodded when Richard gave orders, laughed at the stupid jokes my coworkers made at 2 a.m. But inside, I was running on fumes. My stomach was wrecked from bad food and too much caffeine. My hands trembled when I signed documents, and sometimes, lying in bed at night, I'd feel my heart racing for no reason. The money should have made it worth it, right? That's what I kept telling myself. Mike, you're living the dream. People back home would kill for this. But the truth was, the more I made, the emptier I felt. I bought nicer suits, a bigger TV, took girls out to dinners that cost more than my mom's monthly rent. But the thrill never lasted. The next morning, I'd still wake up tired, Still feel that gnawing question in the pit of my stomach. Is this it? I'll never forget one Friday night. The week had been brutal, markets volatile, clients panicking, Richard breathing down my neck. I finally caught a cab home around midnight. I leaned my head against the cold window, watching the city lights blur past, and thought, is this really my life now? Just chasing numbers until I drop dead? For the first time since I arrived in New York, I wondered if I'd made a mistake. But life has a way of pulling you back in, just when you're ready to quit. Because not long after that night in the cab, something happened. Something that lit a spark in me again. And when it did, I forgot all about being tired. It started with a meeting I didn't want to be in. It was late 2007, and everyone could feel the ground shifting beneath us. The housing market was starting to wobble, mortgages defaulting, banks tightening, whispers about cracks in the system. Most guys on the floor were nervous. Some laughed it off, but nobody really knew what was coming. One evening, Richard Mallory, my boss, called me into his office. His office was everything mine wasn't. Leather chairs, framed art, a skyline view that made you feel like you owned the city. He poured himself a drink, leaned back, and studied me like he was measuring my worth. "Mike," he said, his voice calm but sharp, "you see things other people miss. If we play this right, this whole mess, this chaos, could be our gold mine." My fatigue evaporated. My blood started pumping again. For months, I'd been dragging myself through the motions, but in that moment, it felt like the lights came back on. This wasn't just another trade. This was war. From that night on, I lived in the office, literally. I'd crash on the leather couch in the break room, wake up at 3 a.m. to scribble notes, then dive right back into the screens. Delivery guys knew me by name because I was ordering takeout at hours when most people were dreaming. I barely saw my apartment. My whole world was those glowing charts and the storm building outside. And it worked. The trades I placed hit hard. While others panicked, I leaned into the chaos. I shorted positions when people swore the market would recover. I moved fast when others froze. One week, I made more for the firm than some of the senior guys had in a year. Suddenly, I wasn't just the kid from Baltimore. They were calling me the Machine. The rush was back, stronger than ever. Every win felt like oxygen. The exhaustion that had been crushing me before, gone. Now, I didn't care if I slept 2 hours or none at all. I was alive again. Richard gave me a pat on the back one morning after a big win and said, "Mike, this is what I saw in you. Don't lose this fire." And in that moment, I believed I'd finally proven myself. But here's the dangerous thing about fire. It burns bright and it burns fast. And if you're not careful, it can consume you before you even realize it. After those wins, the money came pouring in so fast it didn't feel real anymore. Bonuses, commissions, payouts, it was like someone had opened a fire hose straight into my bank account. I used to check my balance every week just to make sure I had enough to cover rent. Now I'd glance at it and laugh because the numbers didn't even make sense. It was like Monopoly money. At first, I did what every young trader does. I splurged. I upgraded my apartment to a penthouse with a skyline view. I swapped my used BMW for a brand new one that smelled like leather and victory. I bought suits that actually fit me instead of hanging off my shoulders. Nights out became a blur of expensive steakhouses, rooftop bars, and tabs so high they could have fed my whole neighborhood in Baltimore for a month. And people noticed. Old friends I hadn't heard from in years started calling. Women who wouldn't have glanced at me back in college suddenly wanted to grab dinner. Even my family treated me differently. Proud, yes, but also distant, like I was turning into someone they didn't fully recognize. But here's the thing no one tells you. Once you cross a certain line, money stops meaning anything. After the penthouse, after the car, after the vacations, you're left staring at a bank balance with more zeros than you know what to do with. And instead of feeling happy, you feel empty. I remember sitting one night in my living room, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city below. I had a glass of $100 scotch in my hand, the kind of bottle you don't even see in normal liquor stores. And yet, I felt nothing. No excitement, no pride, just a hollow ache. I thought back to that kid in Baltimore watching Wall Street on TV. He would have killed to be here. He would have thought this was the finish line. But sitting there, I realized I didn't even know what winning meant anymore. The scariest part? I wasn't alone. Some of the guys at the floor, guys making more than me, were chasing the same high. They'd buy yachts, throw parties that look like movie sets, gamble obscene amounts in Vegas. But none of it filled the hole. The more we got, the more we needed. It was a hunger that never shut up. And I started asking myself, if money isn't the answer, then what is? I didn't know it yet, but the answer was about to find me in the most unexpected way. The turning point came from something small, almost accidental. A client of mine, an older guy who'd made his fortune in shipping, gave me a gift one afternoon after a deal closed. It wasn't a watch or a fancy bottle of wine like most clients sent. It was a vintage camera. An old Nikon, heavy in the hands, with scratches on the body that made it feel like it had lived a life of its own. At first, I didn't think much of it. I tossed it on my counter and forgot about it. But one Sunday morning, I woke up hungover, with no plans and no energy for another brunch with people I didn't care about. The camera was just sitting there, staring at me. On a whim, I grabbed it and walked out into the city. That day changed everything. I wandered through Manhattan, snapping shots of whatever caught my eye. Steam rising from subway grates, kids playing stickball in a narrow alley, an old man feeding pigeons in the park. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about numbers or charts or trades. I was just looking, really looking. The world felt new, like I'd been too busy chasing money to notice it was beautiful. When I got the film developed, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The photos weren't perfect, far from it, but they had a rawness, a truth that spoke louder than any balance sheet ever had. I wanted more of that feeling. Soon, photography became my escape. I started sneaking out of the office early to catch sunsets. I carried the camera with me everywhere, even during lunch breaks, ducking into side streets to frame shots of graffiti or shadows on brick walls. My apartment, once a showroom of luxury, slowly filled with prints and contact sheets. But the deeper I fell in love with photography, the more my grip on Wall Street began to slip. My focus blurred. Trades that used to be sharp and calculated now felt rushed. I started missing details, forgetting calls. Richard noticed. One afternoon, he pulled me aside and said, "Mike, you're not the same guy who pulled us out of the fire last year. Where's that machine I hired?" I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to your boss that you'd rather take pictures of street corners than trade millions in assets? I just nodded, muttered something about being tired, and walked out. The truth was, I was torn in half. Wall Street demanded all of me, but photography was the only thing keeping me sane. And in trying to balance both, I failed at both. Then came the crash. One bad week turned into another, and before I knew it, I was buried. Trades collapsed, clients screamed, money evaporated like smoke. My penthouse went first, the car soon after. Creditors called, friends disappeared, and the respect I'd worked years to earn vanished overnight. I'll never forget the day I packed my office. Just me, a cardboard box, and silence. The phones around me still rang, the floor still buzzed with panic, but I felt like a ghost walking through it. I stuffed my few personal things into the box, the camera, a photo of my mom, and a cracked coffee mug, and walked out. No one even looked up. You'd think I'd feel crushed, angry, desperate, but I didn't. As strange as it sounds, I felt calm, almost relieved. Because while Wall Street crumbled around me, I still had the one thing it couldn't touch: my camera, my new purpose. For the first time in years, I wasn't chasing numbers. I wasn't sprinting on the treadmill. I was free. I was broke, yes, but I wasn't broken. Walking away from Wall Street broke was terrifying, and yet somehow freeing. I packed my office, carried my camera, and left the chaos behind. The screens, the phones, the endless numbers, they no longer had power over me. For years, I'd believed money was the goal. But when it vanished, I realized the real reward had been finding something that made me feel alive: photography. I spent mornings wandering the city, capturing moments others overlooked, and nights developing prints in my tiny apartment. Wall Street had given me everything and taken nearly everything back, but it also led me to myself. I wasn't a millionaire anymore, but I had purpose, curiosity, and a story worth telling. Sometimes I think about that kid from Baltimore staring at the TV with wide eyes. He dreamed of Wall Street, and he got there. But more importantly, he learned that life isn't about the numbers. It's about the fire that keeps you going, no matter where it leads. And for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be.